But the fact remains that if we're serious about promoting professional development, we need to make sure that teachers have time for it. There's no way around that. We can't say to teachers, we're going to fill your timetable with teaching, but we want you to do professional development. Well, that's just lip service. It's just lip service. So if as institutions we're serious about professional development, it needs to be teaching, and they're able to dedicate that day to professional development. That's fantastic. I know in other parts of the world where teachers have half a day where none of the English teachers in a school are teaching, so they have time to meet regularly once a week for professional development. These are the kinds of things we're looking for. How can we build at the weekend? It's a good thing to do, but you do it in the evening after you finish all your marking, of course. It's a good thing to do it during your holidays. That's not good enough, I think. And understandably, teachers will say no. Understandably, I side with teachers when they say no in that kind of context. So I've been lucky that a number of teacher research projects I've worked on have been ones which are supported by organisations. And part of the support is they're giving teachers a little bit of time. Not loads of time. We're not giving teachers 6 months off. If you can give them a few hours a week to invest, that's what teachers want. Teachers appreciate the recognition that they're doing something extra and they're getting more time. That's what teachers appreciate. So that's the answers to resistance are two there. What are they resisting, and why are they resisting? But clearly, time is very often a major issue. And that's what I understand. Yes, please.
I liked your presentation in the morning very much.
Thank you very much.
And the idea of professional development, not as an external thing, it was excellent.
Thank you.
Now, this is similar to what Dr. Anis Prabhu was saying in one of the workshops. He was saying teacher has to develop on a regular basis. Or he was talking about teacher reflect. Teacher has to reflect on his regular classroom practice.
Yes.
That is development.
What is worked in your classroom? This is what you reflect on that. So this is one of the type of teacher research.
Okay, all right. Now in the diagram, one of the diagrams I showed you this morning, if you remember, there was that cycle, and then around the cycle there were some additional processes, and one of them was reflection. So the way I distinguish between reflection and teacher research is that teacher research is a more formal form of reflection. Reflection involves a range of activities along a continuum, which can be very informal. Like I'm sitting on the bus thinking about this disastrous lesson I just had and trying to think about why, or I'm driving my car thinking about this great lesson. It involves a range of activities, a continuum of activities, which can be very informal at one end and more formal at the other end. And teacher research is at the more formal end, because we're thinking a bit more systematically about our questions. We're writing our questions down, we're making them explicit. We're thinking about how formal process, which is why we call it research.
And it's directed towards a solution to something.
Yes, and there's maybe a more explicit goal. Whereas reflection is something we can do very informally. We don't have to share it with anyone. It can be completely private. And this is one distinction I make between reflection and teacher research. Reflection can be a valuable tool, but it's very often a private activity. No one else learns from it. No one else can build on what you're learning. Whereas with research, there is an obligation to share. There is an obligation to share. If you're not planning to share, don't call it research. Okay? It doesn't mean that reflection is not good, but we don't need to call it research. If you're not planning to share, don't call it research, because one element in defining research is that it's a public activity. If we don't share, no one else can learn from what we do, no one else can build on what we do, no one else can be inspired by what we do. We might benefit, that's okay, but call it reflection. So that's the distinction I make. To be a teacher researcher, of course, you need to be a reflective practitioner. But you can reflect without doing teacher research.
Yes.
Can I add to this?
You can please add, yes. Okay. It's just another way of keeping track of the process.
But the challenge is, if teachers don't have the language resource, language ability to do this kind of research, how do we support them?
Yes. One thing I didn't talk about this morning is that teacher research is not an appropriate professional development option for every teacher. Okay? Some teachers have more basic needs, and developing their own level of English may be one of those. So teacher research is one option, one of many options for professional development for teachers. It's just the one I chose to speak about this morning. In no way am I saying that's the only option. With their own levels of understanding of teaching, of language, are not at a certain level, they're not ready for teacher research yet because they've got more immediate needs. So it's important to think about who the teachers are, where they are in their own development, in their own career. I just want to respond to it on the basis of what some of you have said. Teacher research isn't just about problems, because sometimes teachers say to me, I don't need to do this kind of response from your colleagues. The answer is, it's not just about solving problems. We do teacher research because we believe we can always be better. That's why. That's all. We can always be better. We can always be better. It doesn't matter what we do, whether I'm doing presentations, I can know professional development. We're not driven by the fact that we have problems. Because then, if we don't feel we have problems, it means we don't need to develop anymore. And then things become a bit boring, don't they? So we engage in professional development because we're driven by the belief that we can be better. Because we want to be better. It's to you because you're here. Okay? And the people who need to hear these kinds of messages are very often not the ones who come to conferences. And that's where you need to go back and talk to colleagues. Okay, I'm conscious of time. It's just before 3. And I think there is another session starting now. Is there? What's happening now?
So we were talking about this experience that we arrive at.
Yes.
And is there any common platform where we will be able to express them for the sake of recognition as well as for benefiting others?
Okay, so the question is about how do we share our experiences?
Dissemination.
How do we share? Yes, I use the word dissemination, maybe too big a word, but it's about sharing. How do we share what we learn? So I'll make this the final question to answer. What time does the next session start? Can someone remind me, please? 3:15, and so between 3 and 3:15, what's happening? Nothing? Just okay. So I'll answer this last question and we can go. Okay? So sharing is important, as I said. If we keep it private, don't call it research. It's good to share. Sharing can be formal or informal. Again, we have a continuum here. Informal is, I'm talking to my colleagues at work over coffee. I'm sharing, I'm talking. We can get useful ideas, we can get useful feedback. Maybe less formal, we have a staff meeting, and I'm given 2 minutes to talk about my work, just to inform people. Maybe a bit more formal, I go to a regional meeting. These are all spoken forms. There's written forms as well, which can be formal and informal. Maybe your school has a website, maybe your school has a newsletter, maybe your school has a notice board, where you can write something brief about your work. More formal, maybe your local association has a newsletter, a journal. We can escalate into increasingly more formal ways of sharing and writing. So there's formal to informal, there's oral, there's written. And of course with social media these days, of course, there are many, many other ways of sharing. So I think it's good to think about the different possibilities that are available. Okay? It doesn't have to be the same for everyone. But the key thing is that we do share. Because as I said, if we don't share, A, no one else can benefit, and B, we're not benefiting from the feedback we can get. And we don't share at the end, okay? We don't keep it all secret, and then surprise, here are my results. If we do that, we're missing out on valuable opportunities to improve what we do. We share on an ongoing basis, because people can say to us, well, have you thought about this? And maybe if you do that, and maybe you can come and try it with my learners, or maybe we can do this together. It's amazing how many interesting opportunities can be discovered over a cup of tea, sometimes, or a cup of coffee. Okay. So on that note, thank you for coming. Very, very happy to hear your questions. One more question? Is it a short question?
It's about feedback from learners.
Yes.
When you realize there's a problem,
Yeah.
you want to do something to
Yeah.
help them with it. Do you still insist on it?
No, okay, this is an easy one. If we're asking learners to give us feedback, if we're asking learners to express their views, do we have to do it in English? No. No. If they don't have the level of English which allows them to express themselves in a useful way that's going to help you, there's no problems doing it in the L1. Because the purpose of teacher research is not necessarily to teach English. We can integrate it great, but if we're forcing them to do it in English and they can't say anything, then it's going to be of limited value to us. So that's a simple. Okay, thank you again.